Go.
How did the war affect your family?
In our particular case, it just happened that my husband only had a 24-hour notice that he was to report for duty. We were living in Topeka, Kansas, and that proved to be chaotic as all get, because we had to get all of our furniture out of the house and put it in storage in Topeka. My son, our son, who was 2.5, had to have all of his things packed up. His toys had to be taken from him and put in storage. We had no other alternative to take them with us. My husband was going to report for his assignment down in the New Orleans area, so he took off in that direction. Our son and myself left Topeka, Kansas, and we went north. We went to Iowa, actually. It wasn't that much north of Kansas, but it was a big change because we went from our home to my parents' home. Funds were at a premium, and we knew that we were not going to have sufficient monies for us to establish a residence, the son and myself, while my husband was stationed in another area. Consequently, all of the toys that belonged to Jerry, our son, and all of our personal belongings as well as our furnitures were put in storage in Topeka, Kansas. And at the time that they were packing up, the packers said that they would pack the couch last because our son had fallen asleep for his nap on that couch. And I said, then for heaven's sakes, put his wagon on the van so that he does not see it when he awakens. And would you believe, when they pulled out, Jerry was awakened because the couch had to be packed, but the very last thing they put on that truck, and they tied it on the outside of this huge moving van, was his little red wagon. And I knew that was going to tear him up, and of course we were very disturbed, thinking that we were separating at that time too. But that was one of the things that really was very impressive to me, seeing his little red wagon having to be put in storage. And at the time of people's going to active duty, you had no idea what your term of service would be, where now when you go in as peacetime, you generally sign up for a 2-year tour of duty or a 4-year tour of duty or re-enlist. But our fellows had no opportunities to do this. They were dedicated to fight for the country, and they just went to service without any knowledge of when we were going to be back together again as a family. That answer your question?
Yes. Were supplies limited during the war?
They had to be, because of the fact that a lot of the supplies were going to our service people. And they wanted to be sure that they had their ample diets. Consequently, things that were apt to be scarce, and coffee being one of our imports, it definitely was scarce. And we could only purchase, and I have forgotten the quantity of coffee that we could purchase with one stamp, one ration stamp. And these stamps, I have a couple of our books that are left, and they are very decrepit looking, believe me. And they really don't bring back pleasant memories. I do not know why I hang on to them, but they are a war ration book, and they do have very small stamps. This is one, that one is number 2, this is number 3. The number 3 one still has this. Undoubtedly, and as I recall, since there are not very many out of here, I am assuming that perhaps maybe some of these were for motorized things, perhaps gasoline or tires, which also were rationed. This is a book 4, and it shows you the spare stamps that we received when and if they found themselves having a large quantity of sugar or coffee. They would be gracious enough to extend spare stamp number so-and-so, and we could cash that in and get a pound of coffee or a 5-pound bag of sugar. Naturally, we didn't do any baking for Christmas, believe me, because we just did not have enough sugar to bake. We also had, as I told you, rationing stamps for, now this one indicates coffee, and there's one left in here for sugar.
Hold on. There it is.
But those stamps we didn't have to use at that particular time. And when my mother was very ill and had to go up to Rochester, Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic for treatment. And my father did not want to take off work to take her up. So I had to go down to the ration board and appear before the ration board because my father needed a new tire on his car before we dared make the trip. And it was a toss-up as to whether or not it was going to be granted that we were able to get one, but they did give us that consent, and we did make our trip. But that is what we had to do. We had to go on this rationing deal. Ladies' hose at that time were not nylon, they were silk. And silk is a Japanese product. So we didn't have hosiery. A lot of us had to turn to wearing cotton hose due to the fact that we could not get the silk ones. And when we would get a shipment of hosiery in one of the stores, it would be like Grand Central Station. People would be lined up for blocks for those women to try to purchase one pair. They were only permitted one pair per person. At the time you would get these stockings in. You didn't have any ration stamps that controlled those. You were just fortunate enough maybe to be in a line before they ran out, you might get some. And another thing that they were very scarce on, and during the war, and at that time, cigarette packages did not have a warning on them that they might be hazardous to one's health. So cigarettes also were very, very scarce. And they would come in at the same time that hosiery did, and it would be about the same type of thing, handing out all of this merchandise to these people who wanted it but were unable to purchase it because there was just none available.
Thank you. And how did the war change your life?
Well, number one, I think probably it taught you to economize a bit more. At the time that we were parted in Topeka, Kansas, my husband was an insurance adjuster. And at that time made a salary that was, in our opinion, a little above average. Nothing great, but very comfortable living. And when he went into service, his paycheck from the government per month was in the neighborhood of $60. And he had allotted a sum towards my keep along with our son's keep because he was being fed and housed with the government, and it did not cost him anything for that. However, there would be incidentals, and thank the Lord he did not smoke, so he didn't have to buy any cigarettes. But he was allotted $17 and I got $37. I mean, this was for a month that we had to live on. And you must remember that prices at that time were not like they are now either. I mean, you could buy a dozen of eggs for, let's say 18 cents a dozen or something.
Loaf of bread was a dime.
Yes, and sometimes a nickel.
Yeah.
But it changed our lives considerably, and it made us realize that there are obstacles that step into a marriage that you really never ever plan or count on, because we certainly could not foresee there being any war when we were married in '37. And when we started our family, we felt as though this would be our life, and we would not have to make any drastic changes, but we did, and we've never gone back. I never did go back to Topeka, Kansas. We sent for our furniture. Our furniture was all there. And we sent for our furniture to be shipped back out to us because when he came out of service, they asked him if he wanted to stay in, and he preferred going into this reserve portion of the service, and it still caught him in some very tight places at times, but that's what he preferred, and we ended up his taking a job, and that's when we went to St. Cloud. No, we went to Jefferson City, Missouri. Jefferson City, Missouri. We had all our furniture shipped back out to Jefferson City. And it was kind of in sad shape because warehouse and some of the furniture was not fit to use, but it seemed like we were opening up a new life when we started unpacking. And I think other than that, it has not really bothered us a great deal. I think we've all shared pretty well by it. Jerry actually benefited to a point because of his experience of being without a daddy and at the same time having a daddy. And I gave him more attention because my husband wasn't there to share the attention that I had to share. But we got along great, and I did an awfully lot of things with Jerry as a child that I probably would not have done had I had a house to maintain. But we stayed with my parents, and whenever I could gather up enough funds, and he happened to be at a base in the U.S. where we might be able to go visit with him for a while, we would maybe go to be with him for maybe a month at a time. So it was traveling on trains that were overcrowded with service people, and they had put all their old coaches back on the tracks because of the population increase in rail travel. And I would generally end up sitting on the suitcase in the aisle on the jiggly old train, and we would ride maybe for a couple of days and a night in order for us to get to one of the bases that he happened to be in. So yes, it's changed our lives a lot, and I don't know what it would have been like had we not had that experience, but God was good to us. He returned my husband in good shape, and we have gone on now, and this is 61 years, so I don't think it's been too bad.
Okay, thank you very much.